Welcome to Global Facts. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. I'm sure you've heard the news. In the early hours, millions brew coffee, a daily comfort, a ritual that marks the start of the day for families, workers, and dreamers alike. The aroma fills kitchens, connecting people across continents in a shared moment of calm before the world awakens. But in late summer 2025, that simple act became the center of a global economic storm. Suddenly, headlines screamed of price hikes and uncertainty, and the familiar comfort of a morning cup was threatened by forces far beyond the kitchen table. The United States, under President Donald Trump, imposed a shocking 50% tariff on Brazilian coffee. The announcement sent shockwaves through the industry, catching importers, cafe owners, and consumers off guard. Overnight, the morning cup became a symbol of international drama, shaking markets from New York to the coffee farms of Brazil. Stock tickers flashed red, and conversations in bustling cafes turned anxious as the world tried to make sense of the new reality. Brazil, the world's coffee titan, supplies over a third of global beans and a quarter of U.S. imports. Its sprawling plantations and generations of expertise have made it the beating heart of the coffee trade, fueling mornings and economies worldwide. The tariff threatened to sever a century-old supply chain, leaving analysts stunned and the world bracing for impact. The intricate web connecting farmers, shippers, and roasters was suddenly at risk, and no one knew how deep the consequences would run. As the U.S. built trade barriers, Canada saw opportunity. North of the border, officials and business leaders moved quickly, sensing a rare chance to reshape the continent's coffee trade. Reports emerged of Canada moving swiftly to secure a $12 billion trade deal with Brazil and the Mercosur bloc. The negotiations promised not just coffee, but a new era of partnership and influence in the Americas. This was more than business, it was a strategic play that could redraw the economic map of the Americas. Behind closed doors, leaders weighed risks and rewards, knowing the outcome could shift alliances for years to come. The fate of jobs, commodity prices, and political alliances now hung in the balance. From factory floors to government halls, uncertainty rippled outward, touching lives in ways few could have predicted. For everyday people, the price of coffee was about to become a battleground. Shoppers watched prices climb. Baristas fielded questions, and protests brewed in the streets as frustration mounted. This story explores the political maneuvers, economic fallout, and human stories behind Canada's bold move in the wake of Trump's decision. We'll follow the journey from boardrooms to coffee farms, and from bustling cities to quiet kitchens, all of it centered on the humble coffee bean, a small seed with the power to stir nations and shape destinies. To truly grasp the U.S. tariff decision, you have to look far beyond the lush coffee fields and the daily work of Brazilian farmers. The answer lies in the long, often fraught history of U.S.-Brazil relations, a relationship marked by shifting alliances, economic competition, and political maneuvering. When the Trump administration returned with its America First agenda, it viewed old trade deals as vulnerabilities that needed to be renegotiated or scrapped. Meanwhile, Brazil was asserting itself on the world stage, growing more independent and forging closer ties with global rivals like China and Russia, making it a prime target for U.S. pressure. Officially, the White House cited unfair trade practices, but the reality was more complex. Trump's personal loyalty to Bolsonaro and a demand for new, more favorable deals by August 2025 played a major role. Under President Lula, Brazil refused to yield to U.S. demands, instead deepening its ties with other major powers and seeking new alliances. As the world's largest coffee producer, any disruption in Brazil's exports sent shockwaves through global markets, threatening chaos for coffee lovers and businesses everywhere. The U.S. gambled that economic pain and market instability would force Brazil back to the negotiating table, hoping to regain leverage. Instead, Brazil recoiled, viewing the tariffs as a form of economic aggression and an attack on its sovereignty. Lula's government responded by accelerating its pivot away from the U.S., rapidly seeking new markets and partners for its vital exports. The move ultimately backfired on Washington, isolating the U.S. and opening the door for new players to step in and fill the void. The fallout from this diplomatic rupture set the stage for Canada's unexpected entrance into the global coffee trade, shifting the balance of power. The coffee crisis was just beginning, and its impact would soon be felt around the world. As U.S.-Brazil tensions soared, Canada saw a rare opening. Long-stalled talks with the Mercosur bloc, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay suddenly gained urgency. Prime Minister Trudeau's government moved fast, aiming to secure a $12 billion free trade deal and reduce dependence on the US. This wasn't just about coffee, it was a chance to open vast new markets for Canadian goods. Trade Minister Maninder Sidhu announced a high-stakes mission to Brazil, signaling Canada's seriousness. With Brazilian exporters desperate for buyers, Canada became an attractive, stable partner. Negotiations, dormant for years, were fast-tracked. Canada's bold move positioned it as a key player in the Americas, ready to fill the void left by the US. The world watched as Canada prepared for a coffee coup that could reshape hemispheric power. The US tariffs hit in August 2025, and global coffee markets erupted. Arabica prices soared to $3.29 per pound, while Robusta futures spiked nearly 5%. Brazil, supplying 37% of the world's coffee, was suddenly cut off from its biggest buyer. Panic buying and fears of shortages drove prices even higher. Brazil responded with a $5.5 billion credit line to support exporters and shield small producers. The message: Brazil would not let its coffee sector collapse. Meanwhile, US roasters and importers faced paralysis, delaying shipments and hoping for exemptions that never came. Financing costs for Brazilian exporters soared, and the supply chain ground to a halt. The policy's impact rippled from Brazilian farms to American cafes. The world's coffee supply was now a casualty of economic brinkmanship. The stakes had never been higher. For those in the coffee trade, the crisis was personal. Brazilian exporters like Italo Henrique saw decades of trust with US buyers shattered overnight. The tariffs threatened not just profits, but the very fabric of the specialty coffee industry. In the US, roasters scrambled for alternatives, experimenting with new origins but facing logistical and pricing headaches. Brazilian officials, eager for new partners, welcomed Canada's overtures but warned that any deal would require Mercosur's coordination. Meanwhile, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick's vague hints at exemptions only deepened uncertainty. Buyers hesitated, supply chains stalled, and anxiety soared from farm to cafe. The coffee world was in limbo, waiting for clarity that never came. For 2.2 million Americans working in coffee, the tariffs were an immediate threat. Small businesses, the heart of U.S. coffee culture, faced closure as costs soared. The burden fell hardest on consumers, already squeezed by inflation, now hit with a coffee tax. Prices for everything from grocery store beans to cafe lattes surged. Roasters scrambled to stockpile beans and reformulate blends, risking brand identity and customer loyalty. The industry's stability was at risk, and the political backlash was swift. Critics called the tariffs a self-inflicted wound, punishing Americans more than Brazil. The Trump administration defended the move as leverage, but many saw only economic pain. The nation was divided, debating the true cost of this trade war. The morning cup had become a symbol of political conflict. The simple pleasure of coffee was now a casualty of global policy. Brazil didn't retreat. It accelerated its global pivot. The Lula administration saw the tariffs as proof it needed new partners. China, already Brazil's top trading partner, became even more important. By August 2024, China took 27% of Brazil's exports, the US just 7%. The tariffs widened this gap, pushing Brazil deeper into China's orbit. Brazilian exporters targeted Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, building resilience beyond the US. This was more than a quick fix. It was a long-term strategy for independence. Brazil emerged as a leader among developing nations, championing global trade. The coffee crisis became a catalyst for Brazil's rise as an independent power. The world's economic map was being redrawn, one cup at a time. The US-Brazil coffee dispute was more than just a trade spat. It was a calculated move on the global chessboard, signaling a deeper shift in international relations and economic priorities. Trump's tariffs were designed to reassert US dominance in global markets, but they came at a cost, risking the alienation of key economies like Brazil and India, and sending shockwaves through international trade networks. Sensing opportunity, Canada seized the moment. By reviving Mercosur talks, it positioned itself as a champion of free trade, eager to fill the void left by US protectionism. and to strengthen its ties with South America. The Brazil deal offered Canada a rare chance to diversify away from its $727 billion U.S. trade dependence, opening new markets and reducing its vulnerability to American policy swings. Meanwhile, China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative drew Brazil closer, offering massive investment in infrastructure and development. Without the political strings often attached by Western powers, the U.S. tariffs, intended to project strength and control, instead pushed Brazil toward China and the BRICS bloc, accelerating a realignment of global alliances. A new trade axis was quietly forming: Canada, Mercosur, and China, challenging the era of U.S. economic unilateralism and reshaping the rules of global commerce. The coffee crisis exposed not only the risks of protectionism, but also the growing influence of emerging economies and the rise of a truly multipolar world order. Economic power was shifting, alliances were realigning, and the old certainties of global trade were being rewritten in real time. The humble coffee bean, once just a commodity, had become a surprising catalyst for global change and a symbol of new power dynamics. The world was watching closely and recalibrating strategies as the balance of power shifted before their eyes. The future of trade was up for grabs, and every move on the board now mattered more than ever. The coffee shock of 2025 was more than a trade dispute. It was a lesson in global interdependence. U.S. tariffs triggered chaos, higher prices, and empowered rivals. Brazil cemented its pivot to Asia, while Canada seized a chance to lead in the Americas. The $12 billion Canada-Mercosur deal symbolized a new, multipolar approach to trade. For consumers, the price of coffee became a measure of diplomatic failure. The episode showed how global politics hits home, shaping daily life. The coffee coup marked a turning point, championing resilience, diversification, and new alliances. As nations choose between protectionism and partnership, the world's economic future hangs in the balance, all starting with a simple cup of coffee.